There was support for Justin Fields starting in that building, and in the time being, he can be a gadget player for them offensively. All right, it's the Breer Report for August the 30th. Labor Day weekend is here. 53-man rosters have been set, cuts are done, and the trade market has cooled down considerably. Teams, for the most part, know what they're going forward into week one with, and that's where we're going to start with our first topic for this Friday edition of the Breer Report. It's with the Brandon Aiyuk news. For anyone who missed it, on Thursday, Brandon Aiyuk agreed to a 4-year, $120 million deal with the 49ers. This is the result that the 49ers wanted all along. It's the result that a lot of us expected all along, as bumpy as this thing got. And part of that is the Niners' history. They've been through this the last couple of years. They went through it last summer with Nick Bosa. They went through it the summer before with Deebo Samuel. When you have star players, sometimes these things are going to happen. And the Niners have shown a capability for handling these sorts of situations. And the first tell that the Niners really didn't have any intention of moving Brandon Aiyuk is that they were never serious about trading him before the draft. Why does that matter? Well, if you were going to trade for draft picks and you want those draft picks to help you in the current year, it has to happen before this year's draft. They never really engaged with teams that had called them before the draft about a trade. That's because their focus was always on having Brandon Aiyuk with the team long term. Now, things did get a little bit bumpy there over the course of June and July and August. And because of that, the Niners saw closure on this. And Brandon Aiyuk turned the volume on this up by holding in, by conducting himself the way that he did during the early portions of training camp. Again, those are some of the bumps that happened during contract negotiations. So, earlier in the month, the Niners went and sought closure by giving Brandon Aiyuk the opportunity to go out and talk to other teams and reopening trade discussions with some other teams. And their bet was that if Brandon Aiyuk went to find where the grass might be greener, he would not find a place that had the combination of money the Niners were offering and the football situation that the Niners have for him. And they wound up being correct on that. Now, New England put together two financial packages that were clearly better than where the Niners were willing to go, still better than where the Niners wound up going. But they didn't offer near the football situation. They've got a rookie quarterback who isn't playing yet. They've got a first-year head coach, a lot of football uncertainty there, so he didn't want to go there. Cleveland, they offered a good financial offer that he was willing to take. They did not have the geography to the point where Brandon Aiyuk liked it. And the football situation wasn't quite as good. It's a good one, but wasn't quite as good as what San Francisco was offering. That's where Pittsburgh comes into play. Pittsburgh was able to offer a deal that's was not financially where Cleveland or New England were, but with a more stable football situation than either of those teams could offer, based on what Mike Tomlin's done over 17 years and based on Mike Tomlin having a rapport with Brandon Aiyuk. Thing is, when you start to look at it and where their offer was at just under $28 million at the time, it wasn't much better than what the Niners had on the table. And the football situation, while good, wasn't as good as the Niners football situation. So when you do the math on all of that, it pushes the Aiyuk camp back to the table, and they're able to continue discussions. And again, there were some bumps after that as well, but they're able to get something done. The closest thing, the closest deal to getting done for the Niners was the Pittsburgh deal, and where that was at the very end. At one point on the table, the Steelers had second and third round picks. Now, the Niners had wanted, again, something that would help them in the current year. So they asked for current players with each of those teams. They asked the Patriots for Kendrick Bourne. They asked the Browns for Amari Cooper. There were a couple of players. One of them was George Pickens that they asked for from Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh did not want to part with the current year player. So the package was centered on second and third round picks. The Niners took the third round pick and saw if they'd be able to flip it to other teams. Denver was one team. They talked about Cortland Sutton. That piece really didn't fit together. And again, the financial offer wasn't that much better than San Francisco's, which winds up pushing the sides again back to the table, and a deal gets done at $30 million per year, a 4-year extension, which will take Aiyuk through the 2028 season. And here's another key. It gives them a piece with which Brock Purdy can continue to grow over the foreseeable future. The Niners have one of the best skill position groups in all of football, but that skill position group is aging. And George Kittle's in his 30s, and Christian McCaffrey has a lot of miles on his legs, and Deebo Samuel has been beat up. Brandon Aiyuk is the one player in that skill position group where you can say that guy's probably going to be there in 4 or 5 years. And so as they get ready to pay their quarterback, as they get ready to pay Brock Purdy, now they have somebody that they can pair Purdy with for the long term. And he's the one guy in that offense, too. And this is an important point as well, that can really consistently beat man coverage. And that's something that Kyle Shanahan really values. And as rocky as things got on a personal level between the team and the player, Kyle always valued him for that reason and a number of others as a player. And the contract clearly reflects that. So Brandon Aiyuk will be a Niner for at least the next few years. Yeah, have a hard time putting a hard number on it, but at least the next few years with the 4-year, $120 million extension in place. My second topic for today. The Pittsburgh Steelers have made a decision, of course, on their quarterback situation. They are going with Russell Wilson as their starting quarterback. I don't think this is so much about Russell Wilson winning the job as it is about where they are logistically right now. Now, if Justin Fields had been off the charts and blown them away, would he have won the job? Probably. But he did enough to push this thing into the final week of the preseason and take it past the final preseason game. And I think that's a result of a couple of different things. Number one, it's because the adjustments that they've made to Justin Fields' game have started to take. The Steelers' offensive coaches did a deep dive after the team acquired Justin Fields, looking into his background, looking into how he lost confidence when he was in Chicago, and they made the decision to go back to some of the mechanical stuff, in particular his footwork, as he used it at Ohio State back when he was the quarterback in Columbus in 2019 and 2020. Well, a lot of those changes started taking practice over the last few weeks. And then in the preseason finale in Detroit, they started to see it show up in the game field. And they're seeing a kid who, of course, went through a lot in his 3 years in Pittsburgh. And they see now a guy who is starting to turn the corner back again as a quarterback. And so, would it translate in a regular season context? That's a little bit less predictable, but he had made real progress from a football standpoint, and he is a incredible culture fit for what Mike Tomlin's built there for the offensive staff. And so there was support for Justin Fields starting in that building. And I think what it means for right now is Justin Fields is a viable option for them to turn to in week 5, in week 9, in week 12, if things aren't going well. And in the time being, he can be a gadget player for them offensively. Logistically, and again, I use that word off the top, logistically, what's important here is that it will be easy for the Steelers if they struggle offensively to go from Russell Wilson to Justin Fields. In fact, the Steelers have done that the last couple of years, making quarterback switches in the 2 post-Roethlisberger years. In 2022, they went from Mitch Trubisky to Kenny Pickett. Last year, they made a couple of quarterback switches at one point, going from Kenny Pickett to Mason Rudolph. They're equipped to do it. And starting with Russell Wilson gives them a chance to do it. Whereas if they had Justin Fields as their starter from the jump, it would have been much harder to make that switch to go to Russell Wilson if you could even keep Russell Wilson on the roster in that circumstance. So logistically, again, that one word, logistically, this gives them a shot to have 2 bullets in the gun at the quarterback position going forward with a team that they still feel like is a quarterback team or a playoff team. Finally, topic number 3, another quarterback situation resolved this week. Jacoby Brissett will be the starting quarterback for the New England Patriots. And I think that this was a question over the last couple of weeks, has more to do with where the team was with Jacoby Brissett than it does where it was with Drake Maye. Everything with Drake Maye has pretty much gone according to plan. If you want to go back to the spring and the early parts of the summer, the way that the Patriots sequenced this was to rebuild Drake Maye from the waist down and rebuild his footwork and do some things that he wasn't doing at North Carolina with him. They felt like going back and looking at his background, he hadn't had much in the way of footwork training at all in college. He hadn't had any in the playing from under center. And so really they wanted to not only be able to teach him, but have that teaching take and become habit for him. And that takes time. And that's why sitting him was always going to be the right move. And the plan going back to, again, the spring and the summer was to work with him on that and get him into a position where they could get him into a place where he could compete with the footwork that they had taught him, where he could compete with the changes starting to become habits. So the way they sequenced the last 3 weeks, they wanted to get his feet wet against Carolina. They were able to do that. He played very briefly in that game. They wanted to get him real work and take some lumps against Philadelphia's first defense when they had a joint practice with the Eagles. Then 2 days after that, they had the preseason game against the Eagles. They did a lot of things he was comfortable with to try to build his confidence up. And then in the preseason finale against the Commanders, they put him in a position where they thought he'd be able to perform, and he did. So Drake Maye checked a lot of boxes. But again, like that's different than having a defense game plan against you in a regular season setting. It's different than putting things on tape and then having defensive coordinators counteract them on a week-to-week basis. That's a completely different thing. And particularly with the group that the quarterback, whoever it was going to be, was going to have him around him, the offensive line he was going to have around him, the situation he was going to have around him. It was going to be hard always to keep a quarterback from getting hit a lot, in at least September and October for the Patriots. And you don't want a quarterback who's trying to form new habits taking those hits. So at least early on, the plan had always been and was always going to be to keep Drake Maye on the bench and let him continue to learn that way. And what opened the question over the last couple of weeks was where they were with Jacoby Brissett. And could Jacoby Brissett run the offense with enough pace and with enough precision to do the things that were going to give the guys around him, the Jalen Polks, the KJ Osborns, the Kendrick Bournes when he gets back healthy, to put those guys in a position to succeed. And because there were some questions about that over the last few weeks, Drake Maye had to leave the quarterback competition open. I think finally comes to the point over the last week or so where it's okay. Like we've got Jacoby Brissett to that place. It looks different than it did under Alex Van Pelt 2 years ago when Van Pelt and Brissett were together. But you got to remember when those two were together in Cleveland, Amari Cooper was on the team, Jedrick Wills was on the team, Jack Conklin was on the team, David Njoku was on the team, Nick Chubb was on the team. They don't have that infrastructure in New England. And so giving Drake Maye the extra time to develop, keeping him out of harm's way was always going to be the best call. And they needed their veteran quarterback to help facilitate that by that veteran quarterback showing the locker room that he was going to be in position to help the other guys around him succeed in what's going to be an adverse situation in the coming weeks. And even if they're not quite all the way there on Jacoby Brissett, they got it to a satisfactory level where they feel okay with it. And again, that allows them to do the smart thing, and that is sitting the third overall pick to begin his NFL career. So that's it for the Breer Report for August 30th. When we come back at you on Tuesday, it will be week 1. The NFL season is here. We'll see you then.